The sad truth about Helga's mom. Oh boy, today's video is gonna be somewhat sad. As I revisit some of my favorite childhood shows, I start to notice more and more hidden adult themes in a lot of these shows. Hey Arnold being one of them. This show proves to me time after time that it indeed was not intended for super young kids, even though it still had childlike elements. You see, as I rewatch this show as an adult, I become more and more intrigued at how well this show would cover adult-like topics. Yeah, that would do it in a way that kids didn't really notice what was going on. This show was really depressing, and I didn't really notice it until I became an adult and started rewatching it. Arnold had lost both his parents, this being the reason he lived with his grandparents. They were really loving people who wanted to help sick villagers. They only meant to leave for a short while, but never returned and were never found. Then we had Mr. Wynn, who had depression over having to give up his daughter during the Vietnam War to ensure her safety. We had Harold, who was constantly the victim of fat shaming, Lila, whose family was broke and lived in a ran-down apartment on the bad part of town, whose father had a really hard time finding a stable job, so this would leave them with a limited food supply and would be on the verge of starving some days. Chocolate Boy, who formed a really bad addiction over chocolate because he was depressed over losing his nanny. Pigeon Man, who ultimately proves that most humans are evil. The Stoop Kid, who had abandonment issues, this being the reason he never wanted to leave his stoop. And then we had Helga, who had a super unhealthy obsession with Arnold, but that's not what we're going to be discussing today. You see, there were many things that went unnoticed in the first few seasons of Hey Arnold, but one thing I couldn't resist talking about was Helga's mom, Miriam. Yeah, she was clearly an alcoholic. Throughout this show, you'll often see Miriam moping around and sleeping around the house all day, mostly indifferent to everything around her. She passes out all the time and is very disoriented when she wakes up. She slurs her words often and is seen many times throughout the show making smoothies. Well, at least that's what it would appear to be. If you were a kid, of course. These were clearly alcoholic beverages and she was forming an attachment to her blender. Being that she makes most of her beverages there, she probably sees the blender as somewhat of a safe place. She also clearly has depression and uses alcohol as a scapegoat. Let's take a look at a few episodes featuring Miriam that support these claims of her being a depressed alcoholic. In season 3, episode 10, Helga and the Nanny, Bob, which is Helga's father, mentions that Miriam had community service at an animal shelter, which was the result of her getting busted for drunk driving. Yeah, she had caught a DUI. Just take a look at Miriam's demeanor at the start of this episode.
Poppy, I'm not good in the morning.
Come on, the fresh air will do you good.
Doesn't she just come off as sad and really depressed? Let's also take a look at season 3 episode 24, the Beeper Queen. At the beginning of this episode, Miriam is seen reaching for her Tabasco sauce, which she keeps near her alcohol for some odd reason. But it's at this moment we can see all the wine she has in the cabinet. Now yes, wine is typically way less strong than your average alcohol beverage, but there are plenty of wines that have high alcohol levels as well. And judging by Miriam's calm, sad, depressing demeanor all the time, I'm willing to bet these have high alcohol levels. Either that or she just drinks a ton of each bottle every time she drinks. We also see in this episode Helga gets dropped off by her mom at school, and it was at this moment Arnold asks Helga when her mom got her driver's license back. Helga claims she didn't, but she had to get back and forth to the beeper factory because she was taking over for Helga's dad while he was out hurt. Yeah, so she was totally driving without a driver's license because she obviously got it taken away for catching that DUI. But hey, let's not put all the blame on Miriam, because she has shown time and time again in this show that she was once a promising young woman with a bright future. This might actually be the saddest part about this entire situation. You see, when given a chance, Miriam will surprise you with her capabilities. At one point of time, she was a world-class swimmer, but she dropped out of college to get married and would eventually regret it. She also won a bull riding title in her youth and was very successful at running Bob's business when he was out injured. You see, the problem isn't that Miriam is some loser and just can't do anything right in life. In fact, it's quite the opposite. The problem stems from her always putting others' happiness over her own. Going back to the episode The Beeper Queen, when Miriam takes over Bob's business while he's hurt, her self-confidence and focus increase tremendously. I could be wrong about this, but this implies that her unemployment and Big Bob's overbearing personality are the cause of her alcoholism. You see, when she takes over his business, she becomes sharper and more attentive, appears to stop drinking, and becomes more interested in Helga's life. It's been stated time after time by Helga that her mom won't even put in the effort to prepare her school lunches, but this time around they start spending large amounts of quality time together. She starts helping Helga with her schoolwork and even preparing healthy lunches for her as well. But this doesn't last a long time. Soon Miriam becomes more and more absorbed in her work and starts to slowly neglect Helga once more. Obviously, because running an entire empire requires a lot of time and effort. So in the end, Miriam ends up quitting her job running the Beeper empire and returns as a stay-at-home mom to be with Helga. She ran the business way better than Bob ever could and could have put her family in an entirely different income bracket. But again, she quits everything and gives it up to be at home more with her daughter, proving that she has a caring heart and is willing to live a more miserable life just to keep her daughter happier. Truth be told, Miriam had a very promising future, but dropped everything to marry Bob, which ultimately changed her aspirations. In the end, Miriam's alcoholism might be a way for her to cope with her dysfunctional marriage, which holds back all the potential she has.